Hello, I'm Rachel Papazzoni. Welcome to Close of Business. Coming up on the program, super scare. Many of us worry about not having enough to retire on, but what's driving that fear?
The superannuation system makes money from people putting money in, so they're going to always say you need more money. And of course, that's creating the anxiety.
And nearly 2/3 of Australians think home ownership won't be an option for young people.
I definitely feel for the generation behind me because it seems to be that it gets harder for every generation.
Also on the program, we break down the basics of Bitcoin. But first, Australia's jobs recovery has again beaten expectations. Unemployment has fallen for the 7th consecutive month to pre-pandemic levels. More than 115,000 jobs were created in May. The demand for workers is now leading to labour shortages. Jared Fitzclarence's engineering and manufacturing company in Karratha in Western Australia is in expansion mode.
David here is one of our first-year apprentices. David's just started with us earlier this year.
When global supply chains were disrupted by COVID last year, the big mining and logistics companies in the Pilbara sent their business his way.
This year we're sitting at about 2,600 projects so far this calendar year, since the beginning of January.
While he's excited to have the extra work, finding enough staff is proving difficult.
We've got about 14 vacancies. We've got a lot more work than we can viably do, and we're in a situation now where we're actually bringing in staff to help meet some of those commitments that we've made, where we're not actually making any money.
Australia's jobs recovery has outperformed economists' expectations, with unemployment now as low as it was in December 2019, with 115,000 people starting a job in May. And critically, the number of hours worked increased and is now also higher than before the pandemic.
The labour market really has made a very good recovery.
Industries like finance, legal and technology are also facing a skills shortage.
Companies are hiring, and where they're looking to add to headcount, not just replace.
Professional services recruiters say with the international border closed, the pool of available workers is tight, and that's returning the balance of power back to employees, who are now starting to negotiate the first decent pay rises we've seen in years.
What we are seeing is a wage increase where people can negotiate 10% and beyond.
Economists say it's just the tip of the iceberg.
We're expecting to see wages pressures build from here, and we have wages growth lifting over this year and next year at a much faster pace than the RBA are expecting.
It's not just high-paying jobs getting a boost. The Fair Work Commission approved a 2.5% increase to the minimum wage this week. The Treasurer concedes as long as the border is closed, Australia's skills shortage will be a problem.
So we're just going to have to skill up our people as best as we can and encourage them to take up those job opportunities where they are.
How are we going?
Dr. Sahai Basir is one of the 115,000 people who started a new job in May. He swapped his scrubs and emergency department hours for work that uses his medical knowledge combined with tech to monitor and improve athletes' performance.
There's always sort of especially with COVID-19 last year, a big demand for frontline workers. I'd be lying to say if that didn't have a role to play in this decision.
His unique skills made securing his new job easy.
I hadn't applied for any other jobs, actually, so I was quite lucky. It was the perfect role for me and I really wanted it.
While today's jobs numbers beat all expectations, it's clear a new issue is emerging. Australia's economic recovery could be hamstrung by the very thing that's helped keep the health crisis under control, the closed border. Without net overseas migration, the number of workers looking for a job in Australia will plateau, and the skills shortage is likely to worsen. Woolworths is being taken to court over a major underpayment of staff that has the potential to put it on the hook for millions more in repayments. The Fair Work Ombudsman alleges the supermarket giant underpaid 70 managers who were on salaries, nearly $1.2 million over the course of 1 year. If the Fair Work case succeeds, the scale of the underpayments could blow out significantly, with 19,000 managers employed on salaries. salary arrangements during a more than 4-year period. In 2019, Woolworths first disclosed it had underpaid thousands of employees, prompting the Fair Work investigation. The company said it welcomed the opportunity for the court to clarify the legal issues involved and that it's paid out more than $370 million to date. The biggest shake-up of Australia's superannuation system in decades passed Parliament this week. Now your super fund will follow you around from job to job, and funds will face performance tests, but they won't apply to every super product on the market. Here's Nasim Kadem.
PhD student Kate Ferris has lost thousands of dollars from not paying attention to her superannuation. In her 20s, she worked several casual jobs and had multiple super accounts that were eaten away by fees.
I was pretty depressed and disappointed because $3,500 over 10 years, that would be a lot of money now.
From November, working Australians like Kate won't be moved into a new super fund when they start a new job. They'll be stapled to their existing fund. Super funds will face annual performance tests and will have to write to you when they fail them. And if they miss targets 2 years in a row, they could be blocked from accepting new members until they deliver better returns.
It means lower fees and better returns from their fund. These are the most significant reforms since compulsory super came in 1992.
But the boss of Industry Super Australia says people stapled to bad funds will lose out because it only applies to some products.
At the moment, we've got too many funds that will not have to sit or pass the government's performance tests. And what that means in a new stapling world is that you'll have plenty of Australians stapled to a poor-performing dud fund.
The federal government's changes include an online tool that allows people to compare the performance of some superannuation funds. But it didn't pick up a Productivity Commission recommendation to automatically default Australians into the top 10 performing funds.
The laws passed would have still made a difference to people like Kate.
The recent change would have really helped me because then all of my accounts would have been consolidated and I would be paying fewer fees and charges.
It's a realisation that many Australians are only coming to now.
As those super changes pass Parliament, the Australia Talks national survey reveals 3 in 5 of us are concerned about not having enough in retirement. That's despite the fact that we might not need as much in super as we think, as Rihanna Whitson reports.
Hello, Natalie. Hi, Jimmy.
Yumi Lee's an advocate for older women facing financial insecurity in retirement.
So if you can put all of this into A4 sheet.
It's an issue that's personal for the 56-year-old. She has less than $10,000 in super.
I have to say that I feel terrified when I think of my superannuation. I have taken time out for looking after my son when he was little, and I haven't actually gathered enough superannuation.
Yumi will have to rely on her husband's super when she retires.
If for any reason my partner decides to up sticks and run off with a younger woman, I will be one of those in that cohort of older women who are left without a home.
Yumi's among the 6 out of 10 Australians who say that retiring comfortably is a problem for them personally. 9 out of 10 say it's an issue for Australia generally. It's a concern that weighs more heavily on the minds of women than men. Academic Michael Rafferty says super funds are partly to blame for our stormy outlook.
The superannuation system makes money from people putting money in and putting money in for longer. So they're going to always say you need more money. And of course that's creating the anxiety.
Super funds say to live well in old age, couples need $640,000. For singles, it's $545,000. But research from Treasury recommends maintaining 65 to 75% of pre-retirement income. The Grattan Institute says this means couples need around $200,000, while singles need $150,000. While women on average retire with half the amount of super that men do, Treasury and the Grattan Institute say most of us can retire comfortably. But if you don't own your own home, are single or forced to finish work before the age of 65, you're more likely to end up being a retiree in poverty.
The boomers will probably be the last people to retire comfortably, and after that, really it's going to be highly dependent on what sort of inheritance you get from your parents, whether you're in a high-paying job for long enough.
28-year-old Laura Edwards is already planning for her senior years.
It's a pretty scary concept.
The financial services worker has recently stopped salary sacrificing $800 into her super account each month and moved back in with her parents to save for a house deposit.
To comfortably retire, I think a property really helps with that. So that's one thing that I'm working towards. I'm also looking at getting into investing.
And with $40,000 in super, the 28-year-old hopes she's on track to live a comfortable retirement.
It's the great Australian dream that could be out of reach for future generations. Home ownership among young people has declined in the past few decades, and the Australia Talk survey reveals the majority of us think that trend will continue as property prices rise. Here's Stephanie Chalmers.
The Green family is on the hunt for a home after waiting nearly a decade.
5 years of pretty steady, hardcore saving, and then a few years before that of more kind of casual saving.
But cutting back on holidays, takeaway food and nights out is yet to pay off.
We're living 25 kilometres from the city, so we're not kind of expecting to be living in a premium suburb. We've moved a fair way out, just like my parents did. I think that's the kind of Australian dream that's been lost throughout all this.
Unlike Stephen's parents, his dream of home ownership is not a reality in his late 30s. His story will be hard to hear for people in their 20s who want to one day buy a home. Particularly in Hobart, where property prices have surged, but wages in the state remain the lowest in the country.
It is very difficult to get by. I'm hoping it'll get better at some point, but I don't know.
25-year-old Tyler Bakes is renting and counts himself lucky to have found an affordable share house. But for many his age, buying a house feels out of reach.
Quite a few people that I know that are finding it really difficult to even picture a future where they own a home.
I think at the moment that certainly is the perception of many young Tasmanians, that they do see home ownership as a pipe dream.
Hobart house prices have risen 60% over the past 5 years, leaving little doubt as to why many young Tasmanians feel priced out of the market. It's a feeling shared by most. The Australia Talk survey found 65% of Australians feel owning a home isn't really an option anymore for most young people. The same proportion says it's harder for young people to get by than it used to be.
3 or 4 decades ago, the house price to income ratio was sitting at around 3.5. But nowadays it's sitting more at around 6 times people's income levels. So of course it is much harder to get into home ownership these days.
Record low interest rates compared to the sky-high rates of the 1980s are one factor in favour of the current generation.
It is easier to make the repayments now. In fact, interest rates are so low, most people are better off buying than renting. The big challenge for them is getting together the required deposit.
The federal First Home Loan Deposit Scheme allows purchases with a less than 20% deposit to avoid lenders' mortgage insurance. And a separate scheme gives a tax cut for first-time buyers who save within their super fund.
Those schemes are really quite restrictive in nature, and they're quite limited in the number of people that they can actually help.
Economist Nikki Hutley says the modelling shows removing the capital gains tax concession and negative gearing would improve affordability. But after Labor took that policy to an election and lost, it's unlikely to resurface.
Unfortunately, as so often the case, good economics doesn't necessarily marry up with what's politically expedient to do.
Plenty of storage on the other side.
In Hobart, Lucy Smith and Jonty Dalton aren't counting on a major improvement in affordability. They're going a different way.
We think a tiny house gives us the best value for money because it gives us everything we need for a much more smaller cost.
Their tiny house is under construction. It will be shipped from interstate and placed on a friend's block of land for a land use fee. It's given the mid-20s couple an option for something that felt out of reach.
It doesn't seem like we're going to be able to own a house until, or if ever, like maybe when we're 40 or 50.
Lucy and Jonty are not staring down the barrel of a 30-year mortgage. They've taken out a 7-year loan. They'll have a home of their own, but not as we know it.
Anyone visiting Queensland will now need to apply for a permit to enter as the state tries to manage the threat of COVID. It comes as new cases are revealed in Sydney and Melbourne's lockdown restrictions continue to ease. But the uncertainty over whether state border closures will continue to be introduced with each outbreak remains. Queensland Tourism Industry Council Chief Executive Daniel Geschwind welcomed Queensland's support announced in this week's budget, but says the sector will continue to struggle as long as hard borders continue. Daniel, the Queensland Government announced its state budget this week. Was there enough in it for the tourism sector that's been so badly damaged by COVID?
We're pleased to see a strong focus in this budget on supporting small business. Our industry is predominantly made up of small business. They need ongoing support through various measures. And also the other big challenge for our industry is being addressed in the budget, and that is workforce and skills shortages and challenges.
The closed international border has impacted tourism throughout Australia, but perhaps none more so than northern Queensland. How are operators there going?
Well, they're going much better than they were 12 months ago. Since Easter this year, there's been a bit of a revival going on. We have had fewer border closures, thankfully, interstate border closures, and we've had a bit of a revival in the domestic market, particularly, as I say, since Easter, and we hope that momentum can be maintained. It has been devastating, it is devastating. There are many businesses that are still struggling to make up through the enormous losses they piled up last year. So places like Far North Queensland and other places that are at greater distance from major population centres and with a heavier dependence on international travellers, they suffered a lot and they will struggle to make up for the losses.
Right now, Queensland is closed to Victoria. How much of an impact do the random state border closures have?
We have to make sure we can put in place more targeted measures that can avoid wholesale border and territory closures. We have to be able to move across borders with more confidence, and that goes for consumers, of course, in the travel market, but also for businesses who want to do trade and who want to build their businesses, recover their businesses with more certainty. It is absolutely essential that we do that. The tracing measures that are in place now, they have to be consistently applied. The vaccination rates have to go up, and we have to absolutely address the quarantine arrangements and ensure that they are more reliable than they have apparently been in the past. So with those measures, we must be able to get past the border closures.
Have some tourism businesses shut down, Daniel, and will there be more?
It is to be expected that some hospitality businesses in particular might not make it, and some have gone into hibernation, and we don't know what their capacity is to return to full capacity in the future. We will and we must be part of the recovery for this state and in other states. That is the tourism industry, the hospitality industry. We are an important employer. We employ nearly 10% of the workforce in Queensland. We will continue to be a really critical part of an industry that will continue to grow. But we have to address the challenges that have arisen over the last years, job and workforce issues that we have. There's a lot of work to be done to make sure that our industry can contribute what it really can to this community here.
State and international borders will eventually come down. How long will it take the sector to recover when that finally happens?
Well, I think the tourism industry will be ready, our businesses will be ready. International tourism is what we do really well. And I think, if anything, the reputation and the attractiveness of Australia can only increase through this tragic period. But we will come out of this looking pretty good to international travellers, I'm sure, and to international students. But we have to make sure we get the government measures in place, we get the pace right. We hope there will be more bubbles way before a year's time, and we can sort of build on that experience.
Taking a look at the local share market, which posted a fifth straight weekly gain. The ASX 200 gained 0.8%, and the All Ordinaries rose over the week. For more on what moved markets this week, including central bank talk here and in the US, Kerry Craig from JP Morgan Asset Management joined me. Kerry, the US Federal Reserve now expects to lift rates a year earlier than forecast. Did you see that coming?
Yes, I think most market commentators did see that coming. It was really a case of the Federal Reserve catching up with the reality of the US economy, and that's one that's growing much faster than it assumed and showing signs of a bit more inflation. So naturally, they're bringing forward the expectation for when rate hikes will actually come through. I would caution, though, it is still some years away, so there's no immediate threat of any type of interest rate hike from the US or any other central bank.
Phil Lowe has flagged changes to the bond buying program at next month's RBA meeting. What do you think the bank will announce on bonds, and will it also have a change of heart on rates now too?
Well, I think it's a couple of steps when it comes to what central banks will do as they start to lift off some of the very easy monetary policy they have. And the first is looking at their balance sheet. The RBA has two pillars of that. They think about their bond buying in terms of their QE program, and they also think about that part which is trying to keep the short end of interest rates down, the yield curve control. Now, that yield curve control will be taken away in July, and it's likely what they signalled this week is that overall bond purchase program will be extended, but not necessarily at the pace of $100 billion, which is what they've done in the past. And they're likely to create a little bit more flexibility for themselves in how they buy those bonds, just so they can manage the expectations around the market. They don't want to see interest rates surge higher on the expectation that we'll think about rates being moved higher soon. So it is all about balance sheets and really not about interest rate hikes at this point in time.
And what about the impact on the Aussie dollar? Where do you see it going from here?
The Aussie dollar's had a bit of a knock this week, and it's more to do with the strength in the US dollar. The announcement by the Fed caused quite a lift in the US dollar as higher interest rates mean cash can earn more money there, and that brings the currency up. But by and large, we've seen the likelihood of maybe some curbs around commodity prices being brought in as well, and that's all weighing on the Australian dollar. Our view is that it's probably a little bit high at the moment, and it will likely come down as some of that heat comes out of commodity markets. And also, as you see the other central banks around the world position more towards tightening monetary policy a little bit faster than we're seeing here in Australia, because inflation is still well below the central bank's target, and they're likely to be very measured towards how they think about the monetary policy setting, even if they are taking away some of those bond purchases.
It's been 12 years since the first digital currency was created during the global financial crisis. Since then, the price of Bitcoin has surged to dizzying heights, driven in part by true believers who think it has a bright future and speculators who have a fear of missing out. David Chow explains how it all works with graphics by Alistair Croy.
Cryptocurrency, it's the new wave. It's what everybody's doing.
Ethereum is going to $10,000 and Bitcoin is going to $100,000.
I think what's going on definitely will come to a bad ending.
There's a good chance that crypto is the future currency of Earth.
The first and most well-known is Bitcoin, followed by Ethereum. There's a crypto for everything, including poo and pornography. And let's not forget that joke currency based on a dog meme that Elon Musk has been spooking.
It's a cryptocurrency you can trade for conventional money.
There are more than 5,000 cryptocurrencies out there worth over $2 trillion. That's almost as much as Australia's top 200 companies on the ASX. The idea behind digital currencies like Bitcoin was to create an alternative payment method which cuts out the middleman. That means instead of a bank recording when money leaves one account and reaches another, the user logs into their digital wallet with a private key, and the transaction is shared with thousands of computers on the decentralized Bitcoin network. They race against each other to verify the purchase by solving a complex math puzzle. The first of these miners to solve it gets rewarded with newly minted Bitcoin. Once the transaction is approved, a block is created, It's then added or chained to a shared list of all the transactions ever made. That's called the blockchain.
There's a limit to how many Bitcoins will be minted. That's 21 million.
Bitcoin mining consumes a lot of energy. In 1 year, it uses up more power than countries like the Netherlands. On the plus side, this inefficiency makes it practically impossible to hack, as it would be insanely expensive to tamper with thousands of computers worldwide at the same time. Bitcoin was created in 2009 by mysterious coder Satoshi Nakamoto. Since then, it's been a roller coaster ride with a few booms and crashes along the way. It surged to a record high of nearly $65,000 before losing half its value in a month. Thanks to Tesla boss Elon Musk.
Everybody. To the moon!
Tesla pumped $1.5 billion into Bitcoin and said customers could buy its cars using the digital currency, before Elon Musk quickly changed his mind over environmental concerns. Then he backflipped again, saying Bitcoin payments would be allowed if more miners used clean energy.
Se aprueba la ley en términos generales.
The first country to take Bitcoin as legal tender is El Salvador, and some say other nations might follow suit.
In underdeveloped economies, people tend to save in Bitcoin because their currencies are devaluating very rapidly. So Bitcoin gives them a chance to keep their savings.
But regulators are concerned that crypto transactions are relatively anonymous, making it popular with hackers and organised crime gangs for money laundering.
And once you've got the QR code, we zap that through.
Another reason why Bitcoin hasn't been taken up more widely? The transaction fees, anywhere from a few cents to $80 this year. Plus, it's slow. The network can only handle 7 transactions per second, compared to Visa, which can do thousands.
It's still quite a early adaption payment method, so I think they're going to have to work out their system and get a bit more stability.
Instead of spending their Bitcoin, most people are buying it just to hold on to it, like gold. Some see it as a safe haven asset to preserve their wealth in times of uncertainty, but unlike gold, Bitcoin is extremely volatile. It's not a reliable store of value, as its price can rise and fall by thousands of dollars each day. Despite that, Bitcoin supporters reckon it's got a shiny future.
And that's all from Close of Business. I'm Rachel Papazzoni. Thanks for watching.